I wish I had never seen it. I wish I had stayed inland that fall, far away from the shoreline of Maine. I've replayed that night over and over until my thoughts are frayed threads. But there's no escaping the memory, no locking it away. Maybe telling it straight is all I have left, though if you're reading this, I beg you, don't ever go near the shore when the dusk fog rolls in. Friends, you enjoy listening to stories, but you don't subscribe to the channel or like the videos. I request you to please subscribe to the channel right now so that I get more motivation to bring you even more stories. If you help me reach 1,000 subscribers, I promise to bring you extremely scary stories with a truly real feel. 2 horror stories every single day. So go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and now let's move on to today's story. I came to Barrow Cove, Maine in September 2022, chasing quiet. My life in Boston had sunk into a tangle of deadlines, shallow friendships, and that gnawing sense that I wasn't living anything real. The Airbnb listing promised a writer's refuge, a clapboard cottage perched over rocks and pines, the Atlantic stretching endlessly beyond it. The host, an old woman named Ellen, handed me the keys with a hesitant smile. "Storm season's early this year," she warned, her voice rough as sandpaper. "If the fog comes in heavy from the sea, don't go walking. People talk about things in the fog." I laughed it off. In cities, warnings about sea mist sounded quaint, superstitions, but there was something about the way her eyes lingered on me that unsettled me. My first days were bliss. I wrote furiously with the windows open, waves slamming against rocks like applause. Evenings brought gull cries and rolling gray skies I could paint whole chapters from. For the first time in years, I believed I might actually finish my book. Then came September 18th. That evening, the ocean turned wrong, darker than ink, pressing like a bruise against the horizon. Then, without warning, a black fog, thick as tar, unrolled across the waves. It was nothing like ordinary mist. This fog churned, rose, and folded in on itself. It swallowed sound. The ocean waves muted beneath it. The gulls went silent. Unease prickled my skin. Still, I stepped onto the porch and stared. The fog crept onto the beach like a living thing. That's when I saw him. A man stumbling along the shore, pale arms flailing, trying to find his way out. He coughed, groped forward, and then his scream split the quiet. Through the fog, I could just see his outline before it warped. His body convulsed, his flesh seeming to shiver apart. There was a frantic, grotesque tearing sound, and then his arms came loose in floating, fleshy shreds. A leg drifted upward as though the air itself had unzipped it. In seconds, he was gone, broken into a cloud of suspended meat drifting lazily above the sand, a grotesque parody of confetti frozen in air. Then even that melted into the fog. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair on the porch, bile crawling up my throat. It wasn't possible. It couldn't have been real, but my ears still carried the wet ripping sound. I ran to town the next morning. Barrow Cove was small, fishing shacks and a lone diner hugging the harbor. Ellen sat inside, nursing coffee. She looked up when I entered, knowing before I even spoke. "You saw it." I nodded, unable to shape words. Her hand tightened around the mug. "The fog's older than the town. Every few years it crawls out again from the sea, like something seeking. No one knows why." I sat opposite her, forcing air into my lungs. "That man," She cut in. They don't come back. Doesn't matter who it takes. Gulls, deer, people, it unravels them. Leaves nothing behind. She leaned closer. If the fog starts, close your doors. Don't breathe deep. Don't follow voices. It'll try to call you in. I wanted to argue, laugh, something, but her trembling hands told me she wasn't spinning myths. That night, I moved my bed away from the windows. On the third night after the first fog, I heard voices. It started soft, just below my window. The voice of my father, dead 5 years. "Evan," he whispered. My name, drawn out, breaking with emotion. "It's all right. Step outside. It's just me." I froze in bed. I knew the cadence, the way he used to call me in from playing street hockey as a kid. Memories knifed through me. But Ellen's words echoed louder. "Don't follow voices." I didn't move, didn't even breathe. The voice called again, raw, pleading now, until finally it dissolved into static, swallowed by the hissing fog outside. I pressed my palms against my ears and rocked until sunrise. Barrow Cove was no stranger to loss, but that week the disappearances mounted. A fisherman named Deacon vanished walking back from the harbor. A waitress at the diner missed her shift. A family from Portland renting a shoreline cabin, gone by morning. The sheriff tried explanations. Riptides, wolves, people leaving without notice. But the townsfolk avoided him. They knew better. By then, I'd stopped sleeping. Nights were endless loops of whispers outside. My mother, my best friend from college, even my own voice calling out in tones that scraped my sanity. I bit my arm once, hard enough to bleed, just to remind myself I was me. And still, the fog thickened. It got me on the 7th night. I had barricaded doors, taped windows, lit every lamp, but near midnight, my cabin shook, like the air itself was being pressed by weight. A low, sonorous moan rose outside, like a ship's foghorn 2 inches from my skull. My eardrums buzzed. A crack appeared along the ceiling, not in the wood, but in the air itself. A seam tearing reality, and through it the black fog poured, oily and deliberate, curling toward me. I bolted, stumbling into the night air. The world was swallowed whole. Fog rolled against my skin, damp but burning too, like acid hiding in coldness. My eyes twisted, shapes slicing through the void, columns, arches, titanic silhouettes of things that couldn't belong to sea or sky, pressing against dimensions, watching. And the voices, every person I had loved, every regret, every ghost of my life, they screamed in chorus, come to us, join us." The ground beneath me blurred, my body vibrated apart at the seams. My arm convulsed as skin separated from bone. Threads of me tugged toward the void. But just before dissolving fully, I slammed into the rocky edge of the jetty. A sudden old carved marker jutted upright, a stone etched with strange knots, older than the settlement. The fog recoiled, shivered back, resisting the stone's boundary. My body, half undone, fused back crudely, scars knotting along my arms. I vomited chunks of blood, but I lived. It never stopped calling. I left Maine that night, never even packed my bag. I drove until my tank dry on the interstate, bought new clothes with shaking hands, and never once glanced east. But the fog lingers inside me. Sometimes when I wake up in Boston, the corners of my room flicker dark. Sometimes when I breathe, I taste salt and rot. And sometimes in the mirror, my reflection exhales a shadow that isn't mine. I'm not whole anymore. Something marked me that night, and I know it will come inland someday. So if you hear voices at dusk, if you smell brine in your bedroom far from any sea, don't follow. Don't step close to the dark mist curling at your door, because when it arrives, it unravels everything. Not just flesh, not just bone. It unravels you. I tried to leave Barrow Cove the morning after my escape by the jetty, but the single road inland was closed by fallen pines. Locals swore the storm had knocked them down. Yet when I asked why no one was clearing them, the sheriff only shrugged. "Best not to be traveling when it rolls in," he said grimly, refusing to elaborate. I ended up lingering in town, bruised and haunted, forced to spend more time with its inhabitants. That was when I noticed how many of them lived by rules never spoken out loud. Shutters nailed in place, salt marks etched above doorways, strange nets strung across chimneys. They all pretended life was normal, but beneath the pretenses simmered fear. At the diner, an old fisherman named Harlan leaned across the booth, his mouth twisting around a missing tooth. "The fog won't stay at the shore forever," he muttered. "Every cycle, it creeps a little further inland. My granda said once it reached 2 towns over before they managed to drive it back." "Drive it back how?" I demanded. But before he could answer, Ellen appeared behind the counter, her eyes locking on mine with a warning sharp enough to shut him up. I should have left, but curiosity gnawed at me as much as fear. One gray afternoon, I hiked into the forest beyond the cove. The pines loomed thick, their scent earthy, masking the brine stench I swore still clung to my skin. After several hours, I stumbled upon it, a circle of stone pillars carved with spirals and knots, half sunk into moss. In the center was another marker like the jetties, though this one was smeared with animal blood, fresh and dark. As soon as I stepped inside the circle, the air grew still. Sound seemed sharper, cleaner, free of that muffled drone the town carried. My chest eased for the first time in days.
But then a voice spoke. Not from outside, but inside. "You don't belong here." I spun, heart hammering, but the grove was silent. Only the pillars watched. The sense of being judged, measured, crept over me as though the stones themselves had eyes. Back in town, Harlan cornered me one evening. "You found the shrine?" His tone wasn't a question. When I nodded, he sighed. "That's our only protection. Old wards, older than the church, older than the town itself. Fishermen used to keep sacrifices there during fog season. Goats, sometimes even..." He trailed off, gaze bleak. "That's barbaric," I muttered. "Better goats than us," he snapped. "And if you think the fog don't feed anyway, you're fooling yourself. Those folks that vanish, that ain't accident, it's appetite." By the second week of my stay, the disappearances were undeniable. The sheriff's young deputy, a man barely 20, failed to return after patrolling the docks. His squad car was found idling beside the waterline, radio still hissing. At the diner, families whispered about packing up and fleeing, but Ellen silenced them with a brutal truth. "Run if you want. The fog follows. Towns inland have tasted it before. The wards here are the only reason Barrow stands." Her words sank into me like ice. How many towns had been erased quietly, their names forgotten, their stories swallowed by mist? On September 24th, the fog surged again. denser than any before. I sat in the cottage, lights blazing, salt circles drawn around my bed. Still, I felt it pressing. And then, a knock. Not from the door, from the window. I turned slowly. What I saw unstrung me. My sister, Marie. 10 years dead, gone in a car accident, her body broken. Yet there she stood in the fog glass, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide and pleading. "Let me in, Evan," she whispered. "Please, I'm so cold." My nails carved blood into my palms, trying not to move. Tears blurred my sight. She tapped at the glass again, lips trembling. But her reflection was wrong. When she spoke, 3 mouths moved along her cheeks. When she knocked, 5 hands pressed to the pane. It wasn't Marie at all. I screamed until my throat tore and the fog retreated. The next day, rage mixed with panic, I searched Ellen's attic, breaking into corners of the cottage she never intended me to see. What I found was an old leather journal, brittle and faintly crusted with salt. It dated back to the 1700s, written by the settlement's founder, Obadiah Blackthorne. The entries chilled me. He wrote of the first colonists building their homes near the Cove, praising the fishing waters, until the fog appeared. Pages described the unraveling, men shredded mid-prayer. Then rituals, symbols carved, blood offerings, desperate bargains struck with the one that waits in vapor. The last pages bore frantic scrawls. It grows hungrier, its reach spreads, the stones barely hold. Someday the ocean will walk the land. The ink smeared into abrupt blankness after that. From then on, time itself frayed. Hours skipped. I'd wake on the porch without remembering walking there. Photographs I'd taken on my phone warped into streaks of gray light. Worst were the changes in my body. Each morning I discovered pieces of myself shifting. A fingertip subtly thinner. My reflection blinking a half-second too late. Once I coughed up seaweed knotted with blood. The fog wasn't just outside anymore. It was in me. By the end of my 3rd week in Barrow Cove, the town had thinned to half. Many gone, others barricaded within shrines. The air was never clear. Even under bright sunlight, a faint black haze twisted along the horizon, waiting. Harlan urged me to join the fishermen's circle, an armed band planning to march to the great stone shrine inland and renew the wards. But Ellen stopped me first. "You don't understand," she hissed. "The stones don't keep it out, they keep it in. If they weaken, the fog won't stop at Barrow Cove. It'll swallow Massachusetts by winter." Her words left me hollow. That night, when the men left toward the shrine with rifles and torches, I followed. I followed the fishermen's band under the cover of night. They carried old harpoons, lanterns, and rifles that looked almost ceremonial. No one spoke much. Their faces were pale and wet with fear. Harlan led them. His bulk carried authority, but his steps betrayed a tremor. He muttered something as he walked, a prayer, or maybe just a mantra to keep his courage alive. We moved inland, pines thickening around us, lanterns casting wild shadows on bark. The fog crept along behind, stalking like a predator that knew the kill would be easy. After an hour, we reached the inland shrine, the one I'd found earlier alone. But now it looked changed. Thick rivulets of brine streamed between the stones. Symbols glowed faintly, lines pulsing like veins. "We need blood," Harlan said, glancing at the others. They had brought goats, bound and bleeding. My stomach clenched as their throats were slit. blood splattered across the stones, steaming as it touched. At first, silence. Then a vibration beneath our feet, the earth humming like a struck chord. But the fog did not retreat. Instead, it surged with force, rolling in from every compass point, swallowing trees, earth, even the stars above. The goats' bodies unraveled instantly, fur peeling to strips, bones floating upward like broken twigs. And then the men began to scream. I will never forget it. Harlan, standing his ground, bellowed for the rest to stand firm. But the harpoons in their hands turned soft as wax, melting. The lantern glass cracked and ran like water. One fisherman clawed at his own face as his eyes detached, floating out like bloated pearls. Another crumpled in half, his spine dissolving mid-shout. The fog licked at me, but recoiled as I pressed against the central marker stone. It burned my skin, but shielded me at the same time. Within minutes, the dozen brave men of Barrow Cove were reduced to nothing more than drifting lozenges of flesh, bobbing like grotesque jellyfish in the black vapor. Only Harlan remained, or half of him. His lower body had gone, but he held on, screaming at me. "Go, tell them, stones are weakening, it's breaking loose." Then his jaw split like glass, and he too scattered upward into nothing. The shrine itself finally cracked with a grinding sound. One of the great pillars toppled, striking the soil with a dull thunder. The moment it fell, something inside the fog leaned forward. That's the only way I can describe it, like a face pushing against cloth, vast, immeasurable, pressing with curiosity against the rift. The shape of an eye, bigger than the town itself, focused on us through the vapor. I collapsed in the dirt. Every nerve shrieked. I felt its attention, a cosmic, crushing gaze dissecting me like a rat under knives. Then, impossibly, the gaze passed. The fog slithered back a fraction, sealing itself into the forest's edges. The broken shrine sizzled with brine. And I knew this wasn't victory. It was patience, the way a cat lets a mouse run, just so the game lasts longer. I stumbled back into town at dawn, clothes caked with mud and gore. Ellen opened her cottage door before I even knocked. Her eyes took me in, saw the ruin written there. "They're all gone," I croaked. She nodded, unsurprised. I demanded answers. Why had she never left? Why did any of them stay in the cove if they knew the fog always returned? Her response was hollow. "Because it feeds on us whether we face it or not. Our family's tied to this shore centuries ago. Blackthorn made the pact, and we carry it still. Leave if you want, but you'll carry it too. It marks whoever survives." Her gaze lingered on me. "It's already inside you, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The tremor in my hands, the salt taste in my throat, it was all the answer she required. That week, Barrow Cove died. Shops closed. Boats never left harbor. Dogs howled until they burst into whimpers and silence. The sheriff was found at the pier, his body unraveling mid-prayer, eyes stretched into rainbow strands by the wind. By the final Sunday of September, I walked among streets more empty than graveyards. The diners' windows gaped like sockets. No voices, no movement. Just the constant muffled shiver of the fog along the shore. I was the last, or at least I thought I was, until I heard the songs. Children's voices, thin and lilting, coming from the beach. I should have run. Instead, I walked toward them. On the sand stood half a dozen figures. Children dressed in outdated clothes, skin pallid as candle wax. Their eyes glimmered faintly red. One girl smiled at me with teeth too sharp. "Come play," she chimed, her voice echoing in triplicity. Another child bent backwards until his spine split, revealing mist slithering out like smoke from broken wood. I gagged, stumbling back. The children laughed, their tones blending into the familiar voices of the townsfolk who had vanished. Harlan, the deputy, even the man I had first seen dissolve. They weren't gone. Not exactly. They were the fog now. The children vanished when I stumbled backward from the shore. Not gone exactly, they dissolved into the vapor, laughter echoing long after their figures blurred into mist. By then, I had learned not to chase after what disappeared. So I staggered inland towards the one faint heart still pulsing in the dead town, the church. Barrow Cove's church was a squat wooden thing, weather-worn and leaning as though bowed beneath invisible weight. Yet its doors were open, lantern-like glimmering faintly inside. Within, I found them. 6 survivors, Ellen among them, kneeling before the altar. Old faces, familiar but stripped of sleep and hope. They had ringed the chapel with salt, dragged old iron anchors and chains inside as talismans. "We can't hold much longer," Ellen said when her eyes met mine. "The wards are broken, the fog's pushing further every night."
Another, a thin man with trembling hands, argued in a whisper. "Then we must leave. We must scatter and hope." Ellen snapped at him. "Scatter? And it will follow every one of us until there's nowhere left to run. You don't understand. It's not the sea fog. It's the sea itself, probing for cracks. And if the wards collapse fully, the ocean will walk the world." Her words found me shivering. Already I thought of how Boston lay only a few hours west, of how heavy the morning air had grown there when I left. That night, sleep finally betrayed me. I dreamed of water filling my throat, not drowning me, but hollowing me, scooping pieces of me out until I was only a vessel. When I woke, I found threads of brine running from my eyes. My skin along the arms rippled faintly, like muscle under waves. I pressed my hands against my face, whispering to myself that I was still me. But my reflection in the mirror smiled a second later than I did. It whispered, "You're part of us now." I smashed the mirror. By dawn, only 4 of us remained in the church. One had vanished during the night. The salt ring had been disturbed, nothing but shredded clothes left behind. Ellen spoke quietly to me then while the others slept. She pulled a locket from her neck, opened it to reveal a scrap of folded parchment, ancient, the corners brittle. This was Obadiah Blackthorn's final note, she told me. Every child in Barrow Cove was taught to forget it, but I kept it because forgetting doesn't stop truth. Inside was a single line in that same trembling ink I had seen before. "The fog is not storm nor curse. It is shoreless hunger, spilled from what lies beneath the world." She closed the locket. "It doesn't just eat flesh. It eats what you are. Memories, names, the threads that tether you together. That's why those taken come back twisted, They're echoes, reflections the fog cobbles together from what it pulled apart. Her eyes dulled then. And if you've seen it, if it's touched you, it's already feeding. I wanted to deny it, but my scarred hands, the brine in my breath betrayed me. On September 30th, the last fog came. It was not like the creeping mists before. This one did not roll, it thundered. Like waves slamming against air, black tide on invisible shores. The church shook, the lanterns blew out. Outside, the town's bells clanged though no one pulled them. Doors slammed open, windows shattered. The fog had come to claim everything. I held the locket Ellen had given me as if it were armor. The other survivors huddled near the altar. We whispered prayers half forgotten, though I think we all knew no God listened here. Then a sound like tearing silk. The back wall of the church buckled inward, not from wind, but from pressure. Something massive leaned through, unseen but felt. My body pulsed in resonance, every cell trembling. The others screamed as their bodies unraveled. Ellen burst into mist mid-shout, her face dissolving into a cloud of eyes that scattered toward me. One by one, they broke apart, flesh first, then voices, until I was alone. The locket in my hand grew unbearably hot, the parchment inside burned, its words glowing like embers. I heard Blackthorn's voice then, faint through centuries. Seal it, or feed it. Choose. The fog towered against the chapel, pressing its black weight inward. Beyond it, the vague outline of something larger than comprehension shifted. Arms or waves, teeth or cliffs, an eye or the whole horizon bent to stare. The stones were broken. The wards were gone. Only one choice remained. I could yield. Let it take me. Let myself dissolve into its chorus of voices, live forever as a whisper in the tide. Or I could flee, carry the mark with me inland, spreading its hunger like spores, knowing someday every city would choke with its breath. Either way, the fog would win. I ran. Through splintered doors, across streets gutted by vapor, through alleys where familiar faces strained from the mist, half-made and still beckoning, past the diner, where laughter and screams blended into one endless howl, to the edge of town, where the road had cleared at last. The trees bent away from me, as though desperate not to touch. The fog pursued, patient and endless, but something held it, corralled at the borders of Barrow Cove for just a little longer. I drove until dawn, until the Cove's horizon was only memory in the mirror. I live in Boston again. I keep apartments high above the ground, windows sealed, no mirrors in sight. But fog still comes, not the sea mist kind. Sometimes before night storms, I wake to brine dripping on the bed. Sometimes voices sing faintly in the tap water. Sometimes my own scarred arms ripple like waves under skin. I know the truth now. I'm carrying it with me. A seed, a thread unraveling slow. The fog doesn't need Barrow Cove anymore. It's already here.